I wasn't hunting scandal. I was following policy's trail to where it went soft.
Access audits, the crossing of wires. Shared drives don't gossip, they notarize. I opened the media server's access logs, the ones that read like a guest book written by robots. First entry that mattered. Her user ID requesting write access to the sponsor loop directory at 8:11 p.m. Denied. The policy is strict for a reason. Event assets live behind grown-up permissions. I felt an odd pride in the know. 90 minutes later, the vendor alias asked for a temporary share to the same folder. Approved by a junior coordinator with a note in the ticket. Quick tweak for tonight's vibe. Vibe is not a change control category. I flagged the approval, not the approver. Intent matters. Pressure matters more. The log stitched the timeline with millisecond precision. Her account uploaded a file named sponsorloopfinal.mp4 from an IP that belonged to the venue's wireless subnet. 40 seconds later, a second file appeared. Sponsorloop_final2. MP4 from the vendor's laptop on the wired port near the media rack. 20 seconds after that, sponsorloop_final.mp4. Classic naming chaos. The kind that happens when two people push in the same hallway and no one wants to step back. Buried in the audit stream was a comment string attached to the permission bump. Use my cut tonight? I didn't need the content of the cut. The context was enough. Policy doesn't care about romantic arcs. It cares about who touched the screen and why. I exported the access log slice, generated checksums, and parked everything in the HR secure vault with a chain of custody line that could pass a sobriety test. Then I zoomed out to the share's ACL history. Overnight, the vendor alias briefly gained modify rights outside the normal release window. There was no matching change ticket, no exec sponsor, no maintenance window. Just a permission spike that appeared, did its business, and vanished. If this were a heartbeat, a cardiologist would frown. I checked the media server session map. 2 active sessions overlapped from the venue. Her laptop on Wi-Fi, the vendors on the rack cable. Transfer rates weren't huge. Small nudges, quick swaps, a few megabytes here and there. Enough to flip a loop, not enough to rebuild Rome. The modesty almost made it worse. Big breaches announced themselves. Quiet misuse assumes you won't look. I chased the provenance of the first upload. The client string matched our standard encoder, same as any legit loop, but the path hinted at a staging folder that belongs to the events team, not marketing. Her user ID didn't have rights to that path on paper, and yet there she was in the logs, sidestepping with a temporary token that the vendor's account had minted. The token had a lifetime of 30 minutes. They only needed 20. Because I respect my future self, I wrote the sequence in neutral bullets. Request, deny, request, approve, upload, overwrite, overwrite again. Tokens issued, ACL modified, ACL reverted. No adjectives, no grandstanding, just verbs lined up like a spine. I sent an interim note to HR, detected unauthorized permission change outside release window, coordinated uploads from venue subnets, temporary token bridging roles, evidence attached, hashes included, scope maintained. The reply came fast. Received, continue, prepare to validate at event under monitor-only conditions. That was corporate for, we see what you see. Don't touch the hot stove until we're standing there watching. Back in the logs, one entry blinked at me like a lighthouse. The vendor's account attempted to roll back the folder permissions 10 minutes after the final upload. Cleanup instinct. Our system logged attempted permission reversion, denied by policy, elevated role required. The audacity and the incompetence shared a handshake. I added it to the timeline and felt the all rise. Systems don't revenge, they record. I pulled the overlay systems config and rehearsed how it would look if HR called go. The compliance overlay doesn't do drama. It prints a small ribbon at the bottom of the Jumbotron with the event type, affected resource, user IDs, timestamps, and the policy clause invoked. No names, no faces, no screenshots, just cause, effect, and time. Minimal, reversible, factual. If misuse repeated live, the screen would show a mirror with numbers. I scribbled myself a micro-story to stay centered. 2 people tried to move a mountain with a sticky note. Then I got practical. I created an evidence archive of the access audits, zipped with integrity protection, added the checksums to the spreadsheet, and cross-referenced each line to the email metadata timestamps. The weave tightened. When the bursts hit in email, the file versions ticked. When permissions failed, the email cadence slowed. When the permissions spiked, the cadence accelerated again. Cause and rhythm. A small worry tried to sneak in. What if this is somehow sanctioned and I missed a memo? I searched again for any sanctioned process validation before the party. The only validation on the calendar was mine, the one designed to catch misuse. The irony tasted metallic. I closed by noting the policy issue in language a lawyer could read without coffee. Privilege misuse on event assets, unauthorized temporary elevation, absence of change ticket, cross-roll token issuance, and live content pipeline interference. I wasn't angry. I was aligned. Facts had formed a shape I couldn't ignore. Next up was device forensics under HR's eye. Not to peek into lives, but to let the artifacts whisper what the logs had already sung. Device forensics. Corporate, not personal. Corporate forensics is like archaeology with a badge swipe. You don't pry, you brush. HR booked the room. Compliance brought the checklist, and I brought gloves of the metaphorical kind. Read-only tools, a write blocker, and a habit of narrating what I'm doing out loud so no one imagines extras. Her corporate laptop sat on the table next to a bottle of hand sanitizer and the kind of silence that makes your heartbeat feel like a drum test. We started with the consent form she'd already signed when she got the machine. The acceptable use policy that spells out how IT can image a device for operational and security purposes. HR read the clause. Legal nodded. I acknowledged scope aloud. No personal cloud, no personal phone tethering data, no user content analysis unless HR later authorizes for policy reasons. We were here for system artifacts and access proof, nothing that could pass for snooping. BitLocker status first. The drive was encrypted, healthy, and happily guarding secrets from anyone without the right keys, us included, because we use enterprise recovery. I initiated a live triage to collect volatile details, open network connections, logged-on sessions, recent USB devices. A venue projector had a unique signature. It tends to show up as a specific display adapter when you plug in with their dongle of the month. There it was in the device setup, logs 2 nights earlier during the exact private rehearsal window. HR wrote the time. I whispered, of course it was, and we moved on. Timeline view next. Windows keeps a quiet diary in the background, prefetch files, shell bags, jump lists. They read like footprints of which folders were opened and when. Her recent items showed deck_client and PPTX sitting shoulder to shoulder with playlist event.json, our media server's local cache descriptor. No content preview, just file names and last access ticks. The timestamps matched the access audit we'd already logged. Metadata holding hands with more metadata. The beauty of boring truth. Wi-Fi profiles tell you where a laptop likes to call home. I queried stored SSIDs, our office, her apartment, and the hotel's guest network. Auto-join enabled. The connection history painted evenings like a skyline. Office Wi-Fi down, rideshare cell handoff, hotel guest network up, short hop to the venue's media pre-subnet. HR asked if we could see what she did there. Only that she was there, I answered. We stay with metadata. Credibility is measured by what you decline to see. Zoom caches are tidy gossips. They track meetings by IDs and timestamps, even when content never touches the disk. A recurring 2-person meeting labeled Content Sync showed up outside work hours, launched from the hotel SSID twice, and the venue wired port once. I exported the cache index, redacted usernames to system IDs, and added it to the vault. Compliance, scribbled, pattern affirmed. I created a forensic image using our standard tool, sector by sector, hash calculated in real time. SHA-256 printed across the screen like a heartbeat, steady, identical when verified. We weren't going to dive into it today. It was a freeze frame for later if HR requested deeper review. Chain of custody form, signatures, media tag, the ritual that keeps stories from melting. One artifact made the room lean forward, the Windows MRU list for file dialogues. During the venue window, a file picker opened to the media share system alias, not the friendly map drive. That alias only appears if you've navigated by the UNC path used in our event pipeline. Marketing shouldn't know that path. People who've been coached or who are sharing screens with someone who does, might. I noted it as knowledge beyond role, not gotcha. I checked the scheduler. A task had been created and deleted within an hour that pointed at a local temp directory mirroring our encode tool's command line. The encode itself was standard. The oddity was the timing and the deletion trail. If you're doing a sanctioned push, you don't clean crumbs while the cake is still in the oven. HR asked if that implied intent. It implies activity in sequence, I said. Intent lives with poets and judges. We peeked at the event logs for device connection history. A USB-C to HDMI adapter had registered, then deregistered, which aligned with the projector handshake. The display topology switched to external only for 20 minutes. Classic show just the deck behavior. No screen recordings, no notes, nothing invasive. Just the geometry of screens meeting light. Because fairness matters, I ran the same light triage on the vendor's assigned laptop with HR's permission and facilities help. The wired NIC history showed a link at the rack port, DHCP lease matching the one in the server logs, and the same encode tool in recent executables. Its Wi-Fi profiles included the hotel as well, with overlapping timestamps. The twin trails tightened the weave without us reading a single message body or opening a single private file. The truth was in the outlines. I zipped the triage exports, wrote the hashes on the form, and slid the package into the HR Secure Vault. I felt that familiar awe, how mundane crumbs thread themselves into a story that doesn't need adjectives. I kept my one-liners in my pocket where they belonged and let the artifacts hum. Before we left, I read back our scope, just to keep the room honest. Corporate devices, policy artifacts, no personal content. HR and compliance nodded. We had enough to stop guessing. We had a clean trail to present. The next step wasn't mine alone. It belonged to HR, with guardrails at scale. Event night would not be theater. It would be a system verifying itself while a very large screen did its actual job. HR involvement, the green light, and guardrails. The HR meeting felt like stepping onto a moving walkway. Quiet, steady, nowhere to run. We sat around a rectangle table that had seen 1,000 bad decisions get translated into policy. I brought the dossier, logs, metadata, access audits, device artifacts. No content, no gossip, just timestamps with good posture. I walked them through it in the voice I say for incident bridges. Here is what happened. Here is how I know. Here is where policy was stepped over. Here is when we stopped. I named systems, not people. I used system IDs, not names. I let the room hear verbs. Connected, requested, approved, uploaded, denied, attempted rollback, denied again. The rhythm did the work. Legal asked the inevitable question about scope. I slid the consent stack across. Acceptable use policy, manager authorization, compliance checklist, chain of custody records. We didn't access any personal content, I said. No texts, no private email bodies, no personal cloud. Corporate systems only, metadata and access events only. The GC nodded once, the kind of nod that means, you can keep speaking. HR's lead leaned in. Do you believe there's a personal relationship? I have patterns that suggest coordinated activity off-site, I said. Intent is outside my scope. Policy misuse is not. Compliance smiled like a teacher when you show your work. Good, keep that separation. We act on the misuse, not the rumor. We moved to event night. I described the Jumbotron overlay in small, careful nouns. Compliance ribbon, user IDs, timestamps, event type, policy clause, minimal, reversible, factual. I showed the runbook page and the rollback steps. Monitor only until instructed, I said, and only if an unauthorized change recurs. HR must authorize in the room. The HR lead glanced at legal, then back at me. If the misuse repeats live, we can authorize a compliance overlay to halt further violation and preserve evidence. She tapped her pen twice. No names, no speculation. System IDs and times only. We'll have observers present. You will not deviate. Understood, I said. I'll run read only until you say go and stop. I felt the steadiness land. Guardrails aren't cages, they're lanes. We set a protocol. HR would station 2 people in the control booth with me. Legal would be on call. Security would be briefed on escort procedure if restricted areas got guests. The events director would be looped in, not as a gossip recipient, but to manage production if anything hiccuped. We agreed on a hand signal for enable overlay, another for disable, and a polite phrase for the radio, initiate compliance validation. Corporate theater at its driest. I asked for one more thing, documentation in writing that the overlay was an HR action, not mine. They drafted it while we sat there. Authorization for real-time compliance display, signed by HR, countersigned by legal, acknowledged by me. The words did what oxygen does. Boundary check, compliance said. If they stop before you display anything, we still have enough? Yes, I said, but a live violation is a clean proof, and it halts further misuse without a confrontation. I kept my tone flat. I didn't want to sound eager. I wasn't. I was ready. We talked consequences without relish. Administrative leave pending investigation if the violation is confirmed in room. Access suspension, device surrender, interviews. Policy citations that reference misuse of corporate resources, privilege escalation, conflict of interest risk. No mention of relationships. Facts, not flourishes. HR looked at me for the human question. Are you okay to run point? I'm okay to run process, I said. My feelings don't get root access. They gave me a small, genuine win. Thank you for keeping this clean, the HR lead said. People usually bring us screenshots. You brought us a system. I exhaled. Systems tell better truths. We set the clock. Event night, HR in the booth 15 minutes before doors. I'd run health checks early, preload the compliance overlay in a hidden state, and keep the audit console on a side screen. If their accounts touched the media share, a soft chime would ping my headset. Nothing public would happen without HR's nod. If nothing happened, nothing would happen. That mattered to me. Restraint isn't a pause, it's a decision. Before we broke, legal asked the last sharp question. If either party confronts you tonight, I'll defer to HR, I said. I won't discuss findings on the floor. I'll protect the production and the process. Good, she said. Protect the process. We stood, the rectangle table reclaiming its silence. On the way out, compliance handed me a printed copy of the authorization. This is your shield, she said. Don't swing it. I won't, I said. I just need it visible. In the elevator, the cables hummed like low thunder. I felt grief settle into one pocket and discipline into the other. I pressed the button for the events level and watched the numbers count up. The green light wasn't permission to perform. It was permission to stay boring while the truth walked in on its own. Event night. The setup at scale. Event night has a smell. Fresh cables, hot lights, nervous cologne. I badged into the control booth 15 minutes before doors. The Jumbotron loomed like a moon. I ran the pre-flight. Playlist clean. Transition smooth. Failover ready. The compliance overlay sat hidden behind a keystroke. Its ribbon configured to show system IDs, timestamps, and the clause number. Minimal, reversible, factual. I whispered the rollback steps like a prayer. HR arrived in twos, clipboards, and calm voices. They took stools behind me, observers by design, witnesses by need. We reviewed the hand signals one last time. Enable, disable, breathe. I handed them the printed authorization and set it next to the switcher where everyone could see it. Shields work best when they're obvious. Doors opened. Music rose. The floor filled with executives pretending they liked canapes. The sponsor loop cycled through safe, approved cuts. The audit console lived on my side screen. The alert chime muted to a vibration in my headset. I was on-call engineer tonight, which means I am both invisible and the first person people look at when pixels sneeze. She arrived with the vendor, both in event blacks, both walking like they belonged backstage. They peeled off with the sponsor lead. I actually like the one who labels things instead of vibes them. I kept my eyes on the console. I wasn't here to narrate lives. I was here to keep the screen honest. 5 minutes in, the audit console blinked one polite dot. Her account authenticated to the media server in read-only mode. Legit. She has read rights for reference. 30 seconds later, the vendor alias authenticated from the venue's wired port. Also legit. People check things. No chime, no heat, just the system breathing. Then the pattern I'd memorized rattled the glass. A permission change request appeared against the sponsor loop directory. Temporary modify for the vendor alias. Justification field. Quick tweak for tonight's timing. It was the same phrasing from the junior coordinator's last approval. My headset vibrated once. I lifted a hand to show HR the alert and read the request out loud. They leaned forward. Deny or pending? The HR lead asked. Pending approval route, I said. Same junior is in the rotation. We watched the approval timer tick. 60 seconds. 90. My stomach measured time in half-lives. The request jumped from pending to approved. The console wrote it in neat blue letters like it wasn't about to change anyone's evening. HR exchanged a look and then gave the smallest nod. If unauthorized right begins, the lead said quietly, initiate compliance validation. First right arrived like a raindrop. Her account opened the directory, then queued an upload named sponsorloopfinal.mp4. The vendor's session opened the same folder, prepared a replacement, set a file lock, and then they began their duet. Write, overwrite, rename. None of this belongs in the hour before a show without a change ticket. I said the words because saying them matters. Unauthorized write activity detected in live pipeline. The HR lead tapped twice on the stool. The agreed signal. Initiate compliance validation, she said, voice even. I pressed the overlay keystroke. Nothing flashy happened. A thin ribbon appeared at the bottom of the Jumbotron. White text on gray. Live compliance audit. Unauthorized media edit detected. Resource. /media/sponsor/loop. User IDs. MKT 2041. VEND 0097. Timestamps. Policy. Event Content Change Control, Section 33. The party didn't stop. People glanced up, curious, then back to their sliders. It looked like maintenance. That was the point. In the booth, my world got louder. The vendor account attempted to roll back permissions, denied by policy. The ribbon updated. Attempted role reversion, denied. Her account tried to release the file lock, failed. My hand stayed on the desk. I didn't touch the content pipeline. I ran the process. HR documented in real time, pins making small weather. Security radioed the HR lead softly. Badge ping shows MKT 2841 and VIND 0097 in the restricted booth. Acknowledge, she said. Stand by. The events director slipped into our booth, saw the ribbon, went pale, then settled when HR raised a hand. Controlled, authorized, compliant. Production continued without a hitch. The Jumbotron did what it always does, amplified truth at scale and made it look ordinary. More rights attempted. The overlay ribbon stacked entries in chronological order. No names, no heat. Executives started to pay attention, not scandal, governance. My awe crept in at the edges, even now. Systems, when you let them, are very good at staying boring while stopping bad behavior. Disable if they cease, HR said. The vendor's session dropped. Her session closed. The permission window ended by its own 30-minute leash. I waited a beat, then another. The console went still. HR gave the down signal. I tapped the keystroke. The ribbon faded to nothing, and the sponsor loop kept looping, oblivious to the weather we just had. We captured the overlay output to the evidence file, hashed it, wrote the hash on paper, then mirrored it to the HR secure workspace. I called out each step. HR echoed. Compliance checked the boxes. I could breathe without counting. The floor below moved like nothing had happened. That's the paradox. Everything had. The moment wasn't about the marriage or the mess. It was about the boundary we'd drawn and honored. No names, no screenshots, no shame. Just a mirror with a timestamp that said, this happened, and it won't keep happening on our systems. HR stood. Conference room, the lead said. Now. I acknowledged, saved the state, and handed control to the secondary engineer. As the door closed behind us, the Jumbotron swallowed us whole, the way big machines do when they decide you've done your part. The exposure, compliance overlay, not humiliation. The ribbon looked like housekeeping. Small, tidy, forgettable if you weren't looking. Live compliance audit. Unauthorized media edit detected. Resource, IDs, time, policy. The room reacted like to a flicker, not a fire. A few heads tilted. A VP mouthed, "It thing," and went back to networking. Perfect. Facts doing their job without turning into theater. In the booth, the audit console scrolled like a calm heartbeat. Her session wrote, his session overwrote. The vendor account nudged permissions again and got a crisp "denied" by policy stamped in the log. The ribbon appended a new line. Attempted role reversion. Denied. No adjectives. The crowd heard none of it as scandal. They saw governance. That was the point.